Okay, we'll go ahead and get Senate Transportation going. Let's do a roll call.
Senator Brennan.
Here.
Senator Furphy.
Here.
Senator Kolb.
Present.
Senator Pappas.
Here.
Chairman Boner.
Here. Okay, we'll go and start with House bills here. We'll do House Bill 39. This is a Transportation Committee bill. Mr. Smith, welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. What you have in front of you is a bill out of the interim, and it really does two major things. One is it streamlines the process for veterans to get a designation on their Wyoming driver's license. Back in 2013, the legislature started this and passed these couple of statutes to allow veterans to have on their license a V, both to honor them and also for whatever purposes someone wanted to make of having the V on the license. With the advent of the Real ID driver's license, they now write veteran on the license, which means our statute is out of compliance because it talks in terms of a V. I am a little out of order. The first part of the bill, the other thing that the legislature did back in 2013 is they set up a process where the Wyoming Veterans Commission would certify the veteran status of the applicant. So essentially you would go in, submit your paperwork to the WYDOT driver's license office. They would send it over to the Veterans Commission to make sure you really were a veteran, send it back. Well, in the ensuing 10 years, WYDOT has developed plenty of expertise to figure out what a DD-214 or a National Guard Bureau Form 22 is. So it's a cumbersome process that's no longer necessary. So what the bill does at the bottom of page 1 onto page 2 is remove the requirement for there to be a certification and only require documentation issued by the armed forces. If they have that documentation, then you can get the V or veteran. And that's what the second part of the bill on page 2, 31.7.141 does, is it simply adds or veteran from the V, basically acknowledging what the current WYDOT process is, which my understanding is was driven by the Real ID requirements. So that's it, 2-page bill, no appropriation involved. It simply streamlines the process for both WYDOT and the veteran by just submitting the right documentation, and then allows them to do what they have been doing, which is put veteran on the license instead of a V. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'll stand for the committee's questions.
Okay, any questions for Mr. Smith? Okay, pretty straightforward bill. Thank you, sir. Any public comment? Anybody online? Oh, come on down. Yeah.
Good evening, Chairman, and members of the committee. My name is Misty Zimmerman. I am the Program Manager for Driver Services. I'm just here to echo what Mr. Smith said. This will simply streamline our process that we have. I'm here tonight to answer any questions that you may have about either the process that Driver Services go through or the existing credential.
Okay, any questions? Okay, you got one? Senator Cole.
Belabor this. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The identification, is that a DD-214 or?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Cole, it would be dependent on the Armed Forces branch. So we would work with the Veterans Commission to determine what would be an accurate or an adequate representation of that.
Thank you.
Okay, seeing no further questions, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, anybody online for this particular bill? Okay, last chance in the room for public comment. Public comment is closed. Committee, what's your pleasure? Moved by Senator Pappas. Any discussion? Okay, do a roll call.
Senator Brennan. Aye. Senator Furphy. Aye. Senator Kolb.
Aye.
Senator Pappas. Aye. Chairman Boner. Aye. 5 ayes.
Okay, do I have a volunteer to take this one? Okay, Senator Cole will take the easy one.
Tough one.
Yeah, all right. Thank you for your selfless service, Senator Cole. Okay, House Bill 41, that's up next, an engrossed copy, another transportation bill. Who would like to explain this one?
feel like a giant today. Okay, we'll just go with it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 41 was amended on the House side, so it comes to you a little bit differently than it came out of the original Transportation Committee. However, what you have before you is lightweight trailers, permanent registrations. So that's the bill before you. We do have a little bit of a recommendation that we learned in working through another bill on the House side that we'll talk to you about. And then I do believe that the treasurers are online and have some recommendations as well. So page 1 is really just most of your conforming language and sort of the sections were open, and the bill actually starts over there on page 2. Page 2, lines 12 and 13 are just referencing the new sections we're adding. 17 through 22 is really kind of where the heart of this bill starts. And I think when you look there, the statute reference there on the end of line 17 into line 18, that really gets us into the very specific type of vehicle that we're really talking about here. So that gets us into the specific definition of being able to register that type of vehicle. This is an area of which we may have some discussion on the amendment. The amendment is actually there kind of on lines 19 and 20. The original bill, and as we discussed it, was to take trailers that are at least 6 years old and make them a permanent registration. This amendment actually added for basically on your initial registration, if you wanted to pay that $500 up front, you could just do that and bypass the 6-year requirement. So we can speak a little more on that later. Moving then on to page 3, you really get into then the very specific type of trailer, and that's in 31.3.101A, Romanet II, and those are 1,000-pound or less. So these are your really small utility trailers. Think about maybe a couple four-wheelers, maybe a side-by-side, but really not much bigger than that. This is very, very small, mostly single-axle utility trailers that are under 1,000 pounds. Moving on then, Romanet II there has to be 6 years old if you don't take the first option, and is subject to registration under the registration statute. So that's most of your personal use vehicles. Moving on, 9 through 20, then just continues to specify if you meet these requirements, you can make these adjustments for permanent registration. Then again, moving down there on lines 17 through 20, you see again that second path, which is that $500 fee on the first registration. Moving over to page 4, this starts talking about the process for those 6-year-old trailers. During the interim, we worked the lines 1 through 3 and came up with an administrative fee of $50. And then there on lines 5 through 9, you start getting into what the actual heart of the bill was as we worked at the interim, and that is 5 times the fees that are required at the time of registration. And that's 5 times the county fee, as well as 5 times the state fee. So that's kind of the requirements to get in here. It also then stipulates there on line 7 that if you're participating in the optional donation programs in 31.3.101H or J, you're not required to make 5 times the donation. H is your organ donation and J is your wildlife donation. So when you register a vehicle, if you optionally want to do that, you can donate money to those causes. You can do that along with this permanent registration, but if you only want to donate $1, you don't have to donate 5. You can only donate $1 if that's what you choose. So that's the language that's there. Moving on then through lines 11 through 16, it really just talks about once you've taken the permanent registration, what that will look like, and that the annual registration is not due after that. Lines 18 through the end of the page then is basically again talking about the transfer provisions of these types of plates. And this was a little bit of an amendment too in it, but that talks about what can happen if you were to transfer a plate like that. Typically, if you have a pickup truck and then go buy another pickup truck and have a little registration available, you get some credit towards that. But this covers that for those permanent registrations. Moving on then through the transfer of ownership, there on page 5, it starts talking again about those provisions down there at the bottom, lines 21 through 23, and then over through line 11 on page 6, it actually talks about the fact that if you have one permanent registration that you own and buy another vehicle that you want to do a permanent registration on, if you do that within 60 days, you can transfer that plate. Outside that 60 days, you start this process over again. So that's kind of how the transfer would work from one permanent registration to another. And again, that's just your small trailers in this statute. And then moving on through this, it just talks about at the bottom of the page there, it just talks about in the registration fees and exemptions, trailers that are permanently registered, them are exempt from annual registration. That's the explanation of the bill, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you for that. Any questions, committee? Senator Culp.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll give you a scenario. Say if someone had an aluminum trailer, dual axle, obviously typically under 1,000 pounds. That all applies to this, and if somebody had it for a few years and it falls under the 5 times what it would be to register it when you initially purchased it, I mean, exactly how would that work?
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
Senator Kolb. Yes, so as long as that trailer is originally under 1,000 pounds, that's typically stated on the MSO or the title. So if it qualifies and you say it was 2 years old and you just bought it, you could do the $500 fee one time and never register again. Or you could pay the normal registration process. And as you recall, vehicles depreciate out over a series of 6 years. So on that 6th year, then you'd have the option to pay 5 times the fee at that time and go permanent. So you've got 2 paths. If right now you're in year 2, I think the way this reads, I would say that you can't take the $500 option. You'd have to wait until you depreciate to it 6 years old, if that makes sense. But as long as it's under 1,000 pounds, it would be eligible for this program.
Thank you.
Okay, any further questions?
Yeah.
Senator Furphy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Help me understand exactly what the meaning is on page 4, lines 15 and 16, where it says, except when transferred, and I haven't looked up that statute, so if you could help me with that.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Furphy. So the except when transferred pursuant to Wyoming Statute 31-214E, that's actually what is created there on page 5 of this bill. E is actually what's created there, and that's where it stipulates that you are supposed to immediately remove that plate because it expires. However, if you have another eligible vehicle that you purchase personally within the next 60 days, you can transfer that over. That's what that means. So we actually had to create 31-214E, and that's here in this bill.
Thank you.
Any further questions? So I'm not seeing a fiscal note. Is there one on this? What's the fiscal impact?
Mr. Chairman, there could be a slight fiscal note, but really when we worked this through the interim, what we came to was, again, this is a very, very select group of vehicles. It's very small trailers. And really what we came to was there's actually probably an administrative advantage to both the department and the counties to go down this path, because in some instances, these registrations are like $10. And by the time you figure out what it costs to send out the mailing and come in and print the stickers and do all of that, administratively, it felt like this was a good group of vehicles to get to where it was a negligible fiscal note.
All right, thank you. Any further questions? All right, thanks for your testimony.
Mr. Chairman, when it's appropriate, we'd be available to discuss the amendments as well.
Gotcha, sounds good. Yeah, we'll have you come back here in a little bit. Do we have somebody online? Looks like somebody from back home. Mr.
We
Shell.
have Joel Shell online. I'll admit Mr. Shell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Hey,
Hear
good.
me?
Yeah, well, welcome to transportation.
Thank you. Thank you. It's great to see you, Mr. Chairman. I look forward to working with you on transportation. Members of the committee, I appreciate the ability to testify tonight remotely. I plan to be there in person, but the weather just hasn't been conducive to that this year. So my role really here is just to say ditto to whatever it is that Mr. Rossetti says. So first, let me say ditto to that. As far as the recommendations we have, of course, as you know, these are the small trailers, lightweight trailers. They're generally about $10. That's the minimum you can pay. I mean, here in Converse County last year, just to give you an idea, we registered about 1,700 of those. The average fee for all of them across all spectrum of new and old was about $13 a piece. 89% of those would fall into the category of fully depreciated or in their 6th year of service. And those average about $11 a piece in fees. So for the average person, you're looking at just a little over $100 to get the permanent plate. Or in your initial year of service, like Mr. Rossetti was saying, you can pay the $500 if it's your initial registration. You know, for us, that $10, it's $5 to the state and $5 to the county. And of course, we take that $5 we collect and distribute it like other property taxes, which means the county collects about $1 of that. So you can see by the time we pay postage for reminder cards and spend the time and effort to collect these, why we would like to incentivize people getting a permanent plate. We think it would be a great deal. You know, it's something I think that benefits both our constituents and saves us some time as well. The other chamber did add the provision to be able to get the $500 plate if you don't want to wait for it to depreciate. Our interpretation of that, you know, the use of the words initial registration would mean the first time, you know, you did it, you renewed it or registered it, and not necessarily a new trailer. So, you know, in scenarios, you could have somebody that comes in with the 2022 trailer, that would be the initial registration. But also, if you came in with a 2020 trailer that you had just purchased, we would also consider that an initial registration for you, and you could do the $500. And the recommendations on the amendments that Mr. Rossetti have are just things to clean up from what happened in the other chamber to make sure that the fees get split. You know, right now, the majority of the fee is a county fee. If you were going to have a new one of these trailers and it was a $60 registration, it would be $55 to the county and $5 to the state. And then there's a provision in this set of statutes that says if we don't deal with the disposition of the fees that are in the statute, then they all go to the state, which is why we're looking at maybe an amendment there to clear that up. But with that, Mr. Chairman, I would stand for any other questions, and we certainly support this as treasurers, and we urge an aye vote on it.
Okay, thank you, Joel. Appreciate it. Any questions? Okay, and do you have a reference for that suggested amendment, or is that something YDOT has?
Mr. Chairman, I did email it to you this week, but I apologize if you didn't receive it. I'm assuming that YDOT would have copies of those as well, maybe? I'm hoping. Or I could go through them if not.
Well, let's check in the room. Is that something you have? Okay. Okay, looks like they're good to go. And I'll check my email. Sorry if I missed that, Joel. So,
No, it's okay.
yeah. Okay, any further questions for the treasurers? All right, thank you for your testimony, sir.
Thanks.
Any further public comment? Okay, going once, going twice. Public comment is closed. Committee, what's your pleasure? Okay, moved by Senator Kolb. And now's a good time for the amendment, if you want to come on up.
Mr. Chairman, if you'll allow me, I'll have Ms. Lacey Bruckner run us through that. She's been working with the treasurers on this, and I think she can talk you through it fairly quickly.
Okay, sounds good.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Lacey Bruckner, YDOT Compliance and Investigation. Should I do this one first or just go in order? Okay, so you should have before you a handout with a small proposed amendment by YDOT that was submitted earlier today. And if you wouldn't mind, we can go through the amendments that Mr. Schell had talked about and Mr. Rossetti had talked about earlier, so that we can do them in order, if that would be all right with you. Okay, so the first proposed amendment that we have would be on page 1. And this amendment is on the handout that you were given. And what this does is, in looking through this bill and another bill related to permanent registration, the department discovered a statute that could be added to this bill that would give us the ability to make this light trailer plate, this permanent light trailer plate, not required to be replaced every 8 years with our new plate series. The way it is now, the statute isn't referenced in this bill, and so technically we would have to replace this permanent plate every new plate series we have. So by adding statute 31-2-213B on page 1, line 10 after Q, that would just add that particular statute to this bill, which will let us make that plate permanent, where the customer never has to replace it unless it becomes lost, stolen, or damaged to the point that it's not legible. And there's already provisions in statute for replacing a plate in that situation. So the next proposed amendment that we have would be on page 2, line 18. So this is in the bill where subparagraph N is added to the statute that is talking about the permanent license plate for light trailers. However, the statute reference at the beginning of line 10, that addresses all trailers. That particular statute number provides definition for all trailers, not just your light trailers that weigh less than 1,000 pounds. So it would be our recommendation that after this statutory reference on line 18, that we add language that says that is subject to the provisions in Romanet I and triple I of this section. So if you'll bear with me a second, if you'll turn to page 3 of the bill, Romanets I and triple I talk about, Romanet I specifically addresses registration fees for light trailers that weigh less than 1,000 pounds. So adding this language on page 2, line 18, would tie this $500 upfront and add initial registration fee to light trailers only. And then Romanet 3, adding it to that paragraph would then say if it's a trailer that's required to be registered under 31-2-201, the customer, I guess, can pay the upfront fee of $500 at initial registration rather than waiting for the 6 years. So that's where that one comes in, just to be sure that it's clear that only light trailers are able to either pay $500 at initial registration and get a permanent trailer plate, or wait till the trailer is completely depreciated at 6 years. That just this amendment just clarifies that part. Let's see. The next amendment that we have suggested starts on page 2 on line 20. In going through this with the County Treasurers Association, the wording was a little confusing as far as administering a permanent registration like this. So our recommendation would be on page 2, line 20, after the word registration, to insert a period and stop that sentence. And then after that, to strike or payment of. And after that, instead add the language alternatively, the owner may permanently register the trailer by paying the fees under subsection O of this section. This just, the way it was worded the county treasurers and our office felt that it might be a little confusing, and that it might be difficult for residents with trailers that qualify for this to determine when they can actually get a permanent plate or upfront or wait the 6 years. So this was just language that we discussed with the County Treasurers Association that might make that a little clearer and easier to administer for the treasurer's offices, for the department, and for residents who have these kind of trailers to comprehend. Okay.
Could you read that in? As it doesn't make much sense.
Okay.
Could you go back over that again and kind of,
Yes.
if you would, please?
Yes. Let me.
And committee, I did just send you the amendment, not that that helps, but
Okay, so how that would read with this language would be the owner of a trailer as defined in Wyoming statute 31-1-101A XXIII, that is subject to the provisions of Romanettes I and III of this subject section, may permanently register the trailer upon payment of a fee, in the amount of $500 at the time of initial registration. Period. Alternatively, the owner may permanently register the trailer by paying the fees under subsection O of this section, provided the trailer. Then you move on to page 3 of the bill, which sets out the provisions for a permanent registration for a light trailer.
okay, I think most of us got that one. No, you not, and that's my fault. But she just went over what it was, so it sounds like it's clarifying language, not really changing the intent of the bill, right?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Then you have page 6, line 21, which is substantive, it looks like.
Yes. Okay. So the next suggestion that we had was on page 3, line 10. Let's see. Okay, on page 3, line 10, that references payment of the fees specified in subsection A of this section. So subsection A of this section is actually statute 31-2-206A. In that particular paragraph, there are not any fees established or specified in subparagraph A. The fees for this particular type of registration fall under subparagraph N. So we would recommend on page 3, line 10, striking A and inserting N. Because the fees for the permanent registration are addressed in N. Subparagraph A is the very beginning of that statute, and that doesn't specify any specific fees. On page 3, line 13, also references subsection A and talks about payment of the fees under subsection A of this section. And again, we would just recommend striking A and inserting N, because subparagraph N is where these fees are specified. So the next suggested amendment that we have is on page 5, line 3. Now this comes back to the first one that I discussed and is also on the handout that you were given. And this is where we add Wyoming statute 31-2-213 subparagraph B. And what this does is this, we would recommend adding permanent after dealer in that paragraph. The reason being that this is the statute that requires the license plates to be replaced every 8 years. And this particular paragraph reads, the department may issue license plates except dealer and antique motor vehicle plates, which shall be valid for not more than 8 years. So our recommendation is to, after the word dealer, insert permanent. So that would make the exception for not only dealer plates and antique vehicle plates that we have now, but also permanent plates. So this would allow us not to renew that plate every 8 years when there's a new plate series. That's all that this one does.
Senator Pappas?
I do have a question. Is paragraph B all new language or only the word permanent?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Pappas, only the word permanent is new. The rest of the language here on this handout is existing in that statute.
So, Mr. Chairman, so when I go back to page 1, it says 9 and 10, section 1, WS 31 to 26A, and by creating new subsections N through Q, comma, 3231B. Am I reading that wrong? It says that we're creating a new section there, or am I reading that wrong?
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman and Senator Pappas, it's actually a good catch. I think what we could do is we could amend that first amendment from page 1, line 10 to page 1, line 9, and insert that reference that was mentioned after 31.2.206A, because then that would be correct. You're amending 2 existing statutes and adding 2 new subsections. So that would be correct, sir.
Any further questions? Okay,
Thank you.
go ahead, Senator.
I just have one question since I wasn't here during the interim and didn't get in on those conversations. Just where did the $500 fee, how did you guys come up with that amount?
Mr. Chairman and Senator Brennan, that actually was an amendment that occurred here on the floor on the House side. It was not part of the original bill.
No, I was actually,
Senator Brennan, are you good?
oh, did you want to follow up? I wanted to address it.
Do want to follow. What was the original bill?
Mr. Chairman and Senator Brennan, so going back through and that actually the big amendment that Senator Kolb asked about, the original intent of this bill was only to be able to permanently register vehicles after the 6th year. So that was the original intent of the bill. The $500 fee, I think, was essentially a convenience, a one-time, this is just the fast track to this. So the original bill did not have any of that for $500 fee. The original intent of this bill really starts here on page 3, really, and that really describes what the bill was. So again, those were only for trailers that were at least 6 years old. They'd pay the administrative fee and then 5 times the normal registration fee, and then they would be permanently registered. So that's how the bill came in out of the interim. It was on the floor on the other side that then they added this $500 fee. So I can't speak to the intent of how that was established or why, but that's where you get your 2 paths. We brought this with 1 path, which was 6-year-old vehicles. That $500 created 2 paths. That's how we got here today.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I was going to speak to that as well. I didn't recall that in committee. My question is, will anybody ever use that? I mean, if you told us the average registration cost is $13 a year per trailer, times 5 years, why would anybody spend $500 just to be on a fast track? I can see, I just don't know how they got to the $500 unless there's some really expensive trailers out there that may be more than $10. I don't know what the most expensive one is, but it just seems to me that the number is, I don't know how that number was derived. Like someone said, oh, hey, $500 sounds good.
Mr. Chairman and Senator Pappas, I think to the question of who would do this? I think both scenarios, actually, you can kind of come to that question, right? I mean, $13 one time versus whatever 5 times that is always a question that a person's going to have to answer. I do think, though, when you start looking at, if you purchased one of these vehicles that was brand new, again, a brand new trailer, even with a $2,000 factory price, most of the time people hold on to those for quite a while. And at $2,000, I think over the course of the 6 years to get to the depreciation point, you would have spent $140 or so in registration. You hold on to it for a few more years and you start getting to $500, and you've had to go down and register every single year. Versus up front, if you know going in, you keep this for a long period of time, the convenience could be worth just paying the $500. Again, it's 2 different paths. It would ultimately be up, I think, for the consumer to make that decision. But I could see, based on the length of time that some people hold on to these, it might be beneficial for somebody to do that.
But Mr. Chairman, but at 5 years, they could make that. I mean, they could decide 5 times after 5 years, right? And why would I pay it initially?
Mr.
I
Chairman.
may only hold on to it for 1 year, and I don't know that. I mean, I don't think anybody's going to make use of the program, is what I'm saying.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Pappas, I mean, trying to guess the adoption rate of the program, I think, would be pretty complicated. I think you're correct. Again, it comes down to, I think, if it was a really high dollar aluminum trailer, as the senator mentioned, those sticker prices do get up there a little bit higher. You go from a $2,000 to a $4,000 trailer, then over 6 years, you would have paid $300. It really comes down to, are you willing to pay for the convenience? And by the amendment that Ms. Bruckner mentioned here on page 2, where you clearly are delineating those 2 paths, it makes it clear you pay for convenience up front, or you wait until year 6 and you can take advantage of the, as you point out, a less expensive option. It's just up for you to decide.
Any further questions? Okay, great. I'll entertain any amendments we might have.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah, go ahead.
I apologize. There was one more amendment from the information that Mr. Shell had sent. If you,
Oh, sure, go ahead. Yep.
okay, thank you. The last one, I promise. It's on page 6, line 21. At the very end. This last one addresses the $500 fee should a person choose to go ahead and pay the $500 permanent registration fee and get the permanent registration upfront at their initial registration. There is no clarification in the bill as to where that $500 is to be dispersed. So the way the bill is written now, that entire $500 would go to the state. There's a statute in 31-3103 that addresses that. So in visiting with the County Treasurers Association, about this, we together felt that it might be more appropriate to have that $500 fee split, half to the county and half to the state highway fund. So our amendment on page 6, line 21 would be to insert statute 31-3-103, distribution of fees and refunds, and then add a subparagraph M to that, clarifying that 50% of the $500 permanent registration fee collected pursuant to Wyoming Statute 31-2-206N shall be distributed by county treasurers in the same proportions and manner as property taxes are distributed, and the remaining 50% of the fee collected shall be distributed to the state highway fund.
Okay, thank you. So that establishes 50-50 split. So, okay, cool.
Chairman,
Yeah.
I don't have anything on line 21 on page 6.
I think that the point is you're just putting it under the existing bill. That's where it goes.
Insert it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so that's simple, clear as mud, right? So, all right, cool. Any further discussion, committees? We are working the bill. Are you, is YDOT good? Good, okay, so we got a couple minutes.
Mr.
Senator
Chairman,
Pappas, go ahead.
we do have all this in writing, right?
Yes.
So you've got that.
I just sent it to staff, so.
Because I've agreed, I think I agreed to all the amendments. And so could I just move them all in one?
Yeah, to give it a shot and see what happens.
Committee, I move all the amendments that were just presented to us by YDOT. We do have them in written form, including the one that we've got in hand, plus the one that you've got in email.
Right. Okay, any discussion on that amendment? Okay, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. The motion carries. Any further discussion?
Bill.
All right, let's do a roll call.
Senator Brennan?
Stop. Senator Furphy, go ahead.
I'm not sure I fully understand all the changes that amendment makes. I'm not against the amendment, but I'm sitting here without reading the amendments, and I'm going, I hope, just to read them quickly into the bill, I hope we're not making any major changes to the bill with those amendments, but I don't know. I haven't had time to, I guess I'll go ahead and vote for it, and we can, once we get the amendments, we can decide on the floor if we want to make changes. So I guess I'll pass it on for now, but this is really confusing, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. All right, anybody else?
Mr. Chairman, I've actually I wrote them in as we discussed them. So I have them all here. I could certainly help Senator Furphy offline. They're all pretty logical. So, but if we have some issues that you may have, I certainly would agree to a committee of the whole amendment if you want to.
Okay, any further discussion? Okay, let's do a roll call.
Senator Brennan? Aye. Senator Furphy?
Aye.
Senator Kolb?
Aye.
Senator Pappas?
Aye.
Chairman Boner?
Aye.
5 ayes.
Okay, do we have a volunteer to take this one on the floor? Okay, Senator Pappas will take House Bill 41. Now, the last bill for our consideration is House Bill 45. Director, welcome to Senate Transportation. Please proceed with your testimony.
Yep, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Be joined by Lieutenant Colonel Wather and Mr. Dave Swindell from retirement. For the record, Luke Reiner is the named Director of YDOT. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, what we bring here tonight is House Bill 45 dealing with peace officer retirement and rehiring. If that sounds familiar, it probably should. Just as a quick reminder, there's 2 law enforcement officer retirement plans in the state of Wyoming. One for troopers, game wardens, and DCI agents, and one for everybody else. During the interim, we were working multiple issues trying to make those 2 different retirement plans the same. But based on the content, the decision was made to split them into 2 bills instead of 1. And so the one that you worked on the side originally was dealing with spousal death benefits. Okay, that one's passing over to the House. The bill here tonight, what it does, it really addresses 2 things. One, the ability to rehire troopers that have retired. And so it is a provision as we looked at enhancing the number of troopers. And again, we're trying to encourage people to be troopers. And the discussion was, hey, there's a bunch of retired troopers out there that we might be able to talk to coming back. And interestingly enough, this is the only retirement plan that prohibits that. So the other law enforcement plan is fine. Sheriffs, deputies can retire and at some point come back, and we'll let Mr. Swindell talk through some of those details. But so that's what this one does. It authorizes the rehire. of somebody already in that plan to come back and work. And then the second thing it does is it deletes the requirement to retire at the age 65. So again, there's the only other place in Wyoming State, and that's the repealer on page 2 where it says, section 2 where it talks about WS 9-3-607 D is repealed. That's requirement to retire at age 65. The only other people who are retired, who are required to retire at a certain age, is currently judges. And so really it made sense to us to get rid of that. And also, if you're calling somebody back because they retired, then we might want to keep them longer than 65, as long as they can do the job. Mr. Chairman, that's the bill. It certainly strikes us as a good deal on both cases. And what I'd like to do is pass the baton to Lieutenant Colonel Walther, and then we'll go to Mr. Swindell.
Okay, go ahead, Colonel.
Mr. Chairman, Committee, Josh Walther, Lieutenant Colonel of the Wyoming Highway Patrol. Yeah, the director pretty much laid it out there, and I just wanted to reiterate a couple things. This really fixes two things, as he mentioned, and we're not asking to be better than any other plan. We really just want to be equal. It's an outdated plan, hasn't been looked at in quite some time. When folks in law enforcement, as you all know, you've heard numerous times, our vacancies are high. When folks in law enforcement now, we're all drawn from the same pool, the same pond, they look at benefits, they look at pay, they look at all those things. So when you look at this and realize that we don't have a rehire retiree clause, or we have a max age, it's just another one of those things that people decide to jump ship and look elsewhere. So we do have numerous duties that we could absolutely use rehired retirees on. I have to be honest and say that not a lot of them want to come back and work crashes and be on call-outs and that type of thing, but we have several duties, from background investigations to instructors, working road closure gates, those type of things. So we could certainly use some rehired retirees, or some folks who even made a mistake and didn't want to retire and we want to bring back. They simply can't. At least they can't maintain that retirement benefit, as the Director Swindell will talk about here in a minute, which is another thing that a lot of folks say, well, if they come back, they shouldn't be able to get their benefit. So I just ask that you bear in mind that when they do retire and they're getting a certain amount, say they work for 25 years, they're getting 62.5% and they're rehired, they can never add to that again unless they pay back into the program. So their benefit, even though they come back to work, they're not adding years of service to that plan. So they're still getting the same amount regardless of whether they're working for us or not. Regarding the retirement age, folks are living longer, they're healthier. In fact, one of the fittest members of the patrol right now is in his 60s, and I'd hate to lose him. I want to keep him as long as possible. So, all we're asking for there is for us to determine that, not a state statute, for us to determine if they're fit for duty. We have physical testing, we have numerous things in place to make sure they can actually do the functions of the job. So those are our two asks. Again, just in closing, not to be better, but just to be equal to the other retirement plan that exists. With that, I would stand for any questions.
All right, so you got, in this statutory provision, is this only dealing with highway patrol, or this change apply to everybody, every state employee, or is it just highway patrol?
It would apply to DCI, warden, and patrol, that retirement plan. We're separate from the bigger LE plan, which is sheriff's departments and police departments.
Okay, gotcha. So same retirement plan we were talking about a couple weeks ago. Okay. And so, yeah, I understand. Thanks, Senator, but it's not in the actual statute that's in front of us. So that's why I asked. So, okay. And same question for the repealer. Is that only, you said it's only highway patrol. I just want to verify that doesn't exist anywhere else except for judges.
Mr. Chairman, that is correct.
Okay. What's the reason for having that there? Any background there? Other than, I guess we can go on to the retirement system.
Mr. Chairman, Dave Swindell, Director of the Retirement System. We believe that's been in there since inception in 1953.
Okay, so nobody knows. Sweet. Okay. Okay, any questions? Senator Cole.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess a few scenarios come up. What happens if you were working for other than someone in law enforcement and PD retired, like just say a city PD, you retired, you came back, got rehired, would you then in fact be able to, what I'd call double dip into the system for retirement because there's two different systems? That'd be my first question.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Cole, so if I understand the question correctly, we have a city police officer who retires in the law enforcement plan as a city police officer, draws his retirement benefit, and then seeks to have a different employment in another plan. That could be the public employee plan as a teacher, or perhaps work for in the warden and patrol plan as a state trooper. Do I understand the question right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, they can do that.
Follow up. So what age would you retire at, I guess is my bigger question. Now you're going to drop 65. You're going to have an 80-year-old running around out. I mean, I don't know. I'm saying if you don't have any age, I mean, I don't know why they originally decided to say 65 was the limit. I mean, obviously a long time ago. But now it's isn't there liability for workman's comp claims? Because obviously we all fall apart, and I'll just attest from my own experience in life and other people's, that we'd have higher experience with workman's comp claims.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Cole, I don't know if I'm an expert on workers' comp claims, but there was a survey from the National Association of State Retirement Administrators that talked about various provisions in public safety plans. So it covered firefighters, police officers, and state troopers. And they had various provisions, and the consensus in the survey is that there wasn't any big increase in workers' comp plans for plans that had a larger, older limit or no limit at all. So at least in the state survey, it hasn't been an issue amongst my peers.
But getting back, I get the answer to the question about how old could you be to work for the
Mr. Chairman, if I may, Senator Colvin, and we can kick it back to Lieutenant Colonel Walther again. I guess our perspective is this, is men and women age differently. And some could be a trooper at age 70, and some probably shouldn't be at age 55. And so this is the only place in any law enforcement statute where it's set. And we think that that should be up to us to decide when you retire, not an arbitrary age in a statute. And so I think that's what you pay me. That's what you pay the lieutenant colonel to determine is, hey, are you fit for duty? They certainly have physical fitness tests. There's, and so it is, not everybody will stay past age 65. That's for sure. But some could, and we'd like them to.
Okay, any further questions? Okay, thank you, gentlemen. So, okay, pretty straightforward piece of legislation, I guess. Any public comment online? Okay, nobody in the room, it looks like, I'm guessing. Okay, all right, so public comment is closed. What's your pleasure, committee?
Move approval.
Moved by Senator Furphy. Any discussion? Okay, let's do a roll call.
Senator Brennan.
Aye.
Senator Furphy.
Aye.
Senator Kolb.
No?
Senator Pappas.
Aye.
Chairman Boner.
Aye.
4 ayes, 1 no.
Okay, great. Do we have a volunteer for this one?
I'll do it. I did
Senator
the
Furphy.
other one, so.
Nice. Yeah, that's true. All right. Very good. Well, thanks for the work, committee. So far, I think that's about half of our bills we got assigned to us so far. So we'll see how many House bills we get here.